Welcome, everybody. And it is such a pleasure to get to be with Kelly Walden. And it's just also a pleasure to get to be with you guys in this brand new world that I'm in terms of we're entering into the realm of podcasts. And so I'll do, this is the first time I'm doing this introduction, which is just kind of, a hoot and a holler for me to be even saying all this. But so welcome to the Story Alchemist. And this is a podcast which really examines our world through the mythic lens. And really, what does it mean to be storytellers in a modern world? And it also features the stories and the storytellers that are bringing healing and positive social change to this planet. And I'm really crazy excited to introduce to you and being in a really rich conversation with one of my favorite people on the planet. And I feel so lucky that we get to share the same canyon, the same land of this wild canyon of Topanga. And Callie Sullivan Walden, aka Dr. Dream, is an award-winning international best-selling author of 10 books. One of her latest books is A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I had so much fun reading this book. Look, I didn't do this in college, Kelly, just so you know. A little
I
thing.
love it.
And I did it with your book because there's so many rich gems in this book. She's also written, and so this is a book called A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, The Art of Transforming the Tragic into Magic. And it was named by Women's World Book of the Week and Inspire Magazine's top 10 most inspiring books. And Kelly is a dream expert, certified clinical hypnotherapist, international speaker, workshop facilitator. It goes on and on. She is a prolific writer. She also, and I'll tell you this, she's created this super magical, the tarot decks that she's created. Every time I pull them, and I like to tell people, like, I'm woo, but I'm not woo woo. Like your decks are like there's some big magic in them. Every time I pull those cards, it says exactly what I need to hear at that moment. They're definitely laden with a potency. And here we are talking about the healing power of storytelling.
What an honor, what a privilege to be with you. And out of context. Normally we're all grubby on the road doing our walk and talk on Red Rock. So this is fun to actually be sort of formal. So
Whatever formal is.
formal. How do you do? So good to be with you.
Yeah. And I was telling them, and I'll tell you too, that I said, you guys should really come to this conversation with Kelly because, I think I know a thing or two about symbol and metaphor, and I'm pretty good at it and all that. And then every time I take my dreams to you, you just like explode my brain in terms of the connections that you make and the way that you look at it and just extraordinary observations. And yeah, so if
Well, you
people
have pretty awesome dreams, so it's some good material to work with,
it's true.
I must say.
Okay. So part of our tradition is to start each conversation with that miracle moment, that wild story in your world where you've experienced some kind of serendipity, magic, where the world revealed itself in a state of delight.
Oh, okay. This is what just popped in, and I should have probably been more prepared, but this is actually a story that I write about in my book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. And it doesn't start off magical, but it gets there. So this is the mosaic story in my so the I get a call from a friend a few years ago because her brother died in a car accident the night before. He ran out of gas on the freeway. So sorry, this is a harsh way to start, but we start with the tragic and then we find our way to the magic. Anyway, he is one of those people that is so beloved. He is like literally at the funeral. She said there were, that there were thousands, I don't know, 1,000 people. And everyone there thought they were his best friend. So this was a big loss, a big tragedy. And so I'm a part of this friend of mine, Catherine's world, and helping her to move through the grief. And I share with her my near death experience, which is another story I write about in A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, because that gave me a personal glimpse of what's on the other side. And I find that when I'm talking to somebody who's grieving, it helps for them to hear about that, because it's not just a theoretical, conceptual idea of what's on the other side. I've been there. I've got a stamp on my passport from there. In my mind, there's a stamp. And she recommended that her family come to see me. I'm not a grief counselor, I'm a dream expert, but that kind of qualifies me to talk about things on the other side, because so many dreams are about things that happen on the other side. So the night before I was going to have a session with her mother, I I f- I was kind of freaking out because this was out of my depth. The mother of somebody who's lost their child. How would I possibly know how to hold space for that level of grief? So I did what I always do, and I asked for a dream to help me. Give me something. Give me something. And I woke up in the morning. Normally, I have very elaborate dreams, sometimes multiple remembered dreams. But on this particular morning, there was just one word, and the word was mosaic. And I wrote it down in my journal. Literally, I wrote it down over and over and over, heavy with the pen, like almost breaking the page. Like, come on, isn't there something else that's going to come out of mosaic? Like, that means nothing to me. I don't know where to put that. Thanks, but no thanks. Great. I get to go into this session all alone. I asked for help and help didn't arrive, so thanks a lot. So I had a little snarkiness with God, the universe, the woo of the who of the whatever.
Mhm.
So I go into the session and I'm doing the very best I can to hold this space for this grieving mother. And she tells me about about the funeral. She tells me about what she's been, and mostly I'm just listening, mostly just listening to her talk about the waves of her grief and how she's processing it. And towards the end of the session, she says, I've never received so many flowers and gifts from people. So many people loved Brian. And she said, but the gift that's the most impactful, I think, is this mosaic that one of his best friends made. And I'm like, did you say mosaic? 'Cause that's not a word I use every day. That's not a common word. And she said, yeah, he took hundreds of pictures of Brian, and he put it into some program, and it consolidated into a portrait of his face, but it's a mosaic that's made up of thousands of tiny little pixels of other pictures of him. And it's this beautiful mosaic. I've been looking at it the whole time we've been having this session. And I just wept. I just kind of exploded, and I shared with her my dream. I shared with her my process, and she started to weep, but it was like tears of joy. Like, that's just that's just got to be something. That's got to be Brian communicating. She said, "Oh my God, Brian, I know you're here. You've got to be here. You're paying attention. You're listening. We're not done being in communication. Our relationship isn't over." So that was so magical. We got off the phone. She said she was immediately going to call everybody and tell them about this sort of miracle. So, if that wasn't enough, like that was enough. But the next phone call I get on after this session is with my mom, who tells me that her and my dad have decided that they're moving out of their home in suburban Whittier, and they want to move to the more bustling, thriving city. They want to move to downtown Los Angeles. And I'm like picturing my mom with her big purse getting mugged, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Nope. I declare that it is a no. You are not moving downtown. You guys are too old. You're too. And she's like, but we want the thriving. We want there's so much diversity, and there's art and, all this stuff. And I'm like, no, no, no. She said, we found this beautiful building. It's called the Mosaic. I went, did you say mosaic? She said, yeah, it's beautiful. I said, fine, you have my support. Just like that on a dime. And it became an opening for so much magic and goodness for my mom and dad. It was like out of the sleepy suburbs into the thriving city. It was nothing but positive. So I think that's a very long-winded way of answering your question. But paying attention to dreams and getting those random symbols, even if we think they're just nothing, there's always some magic to them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I so appreciate the, I don't know, the humble nature of it, the reality of like, I think so oftentimes we're like, oh, I'm going to make my prayer and it's going to be answered. And like, sometimes you make requests of yourself, of other people, of the universe, and they aren't answered in a way that we can understand. And to be, in the honest frustration and the humbleness of like, yeah, I can't understand this right now.
But
And
to write it down anyway, I mean, I at least did what I tell people to do, even if it doesn't make sense. Be like a dutiful secretary. Just take dictation. It's not yours to judge. And literally, I have a client that just reached out to me yesterday. He's like, what am I supposed to do with this dream? It makes no sense. I'm like, just hang out with it, relax, and just look for signs. And be open, be curious, be a little kid in a sandbox. We don't have to be these hardcore excavationists that are anthropologists figuring it all out. We don't have to be smart. We need to be open and humble and like a little kid and delight when we do see that confirmation and that insight and share it with someone. That's our job. That's it. That's it. And then so it can be fun
yeah,
if we don't put so much pressure to have to figure it all out so quickly.
right. That following the flow, like the following flow of life. Like, okay, where are you trying to take me? I'll take one more step closer towards you. And then maybe the door will reveal. Who's to say? I want to talk to you about the journey between being a dream expert. Like, how does someone become a dream expert? Like, what's your creation story? It's like we all have dreams, and then like all of a sudden you become something like that. It's like makes a
Yeah.
life of being with people in this traveling between the worlds. And can you just tell us a little bit? I mean, because you walked off the normal path, and
Without realizing it.
without realizing, I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey of just finding this expression of play and delight and
I think
passion?
I think some people hear my story and they're like, "Wow." So, it's a little discombobulating because most here the way we're typically wired is we do our spiritual work and then we become attuned to the signs and we follow them and everything works out. That's how it's supposed to be. And for me, so much the best things in my life have been me telling God, the universe, my plans, hearing that big loud belly laugh, and then something else happening. So a lot of it is having a great idea and then letting go and then being following a completely different path based on what I thought. So I once upon a time went to Hollywood to pursue being an actress. That was all I could imagine doing because everything else just seemed so boring. And being in the world of acting felt like, okay, that would be exciting. That would be fun. That would be on the edge. And I would have never in a million years thought dreams were the life for me. But it turns out that meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, I'm good at dreams. I've always had a very vivid dream life, and it goes all the way back to the beginning of my first remembered memories with my sisters, with just important things that have always kind of revealed themselves to me via dreams. They've been like my tarot cards. And I was sitting in New York City with my literary agent at the time, and we were trying to get this other book published. And she said, "We're not really having much luck with this book, but you know what? I have a really strong instinct you should be writing about dreams." And I laughed at her. What? There's already dream books out there. I don't, what do I know? And she said, "I really enjoy your take on dreams. Every time I bring a dream to you, I always feel better about myself." And I think left to my devices, I would have made myself wrong or crazy or there's something bad. But you always have this, it's not just an airy fairy kind of a spin, but you have a really interesting take on dreams. So I told Dana, my husband, about this, and he was like, yes, do it, get the gig. And I'm like, oh, I thought he was going to think that was as ridiculous as I did. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to just follow the breadcrumbs. And lo and behold, it led to a pretty big book deal with Warner Books at the time. Um, a, a, the book is called I Had the Strangest Dream, The Dreamer's Dictionary for the 21st Century. A big part of it is like how to work with dreams and then how I work with dreams. And then the rest of it is a dictionary for the 21st century. And that just kept, so I'd keep going, but now I want to do this, now I want to do this, and the universe would just be saying nope, 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 keep doing this. So there's been like breadcrumbs that just keep leading me, and it turns out even when I say okay, no more dreams, I'm going to do something else, dreams just keep coming back in. Even with this new book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, right off the bat you wouldn't think there's anything dream centric about it, but dreams weave throughout
Mhm.
this book. I mean, in the Brian story that I just shared with you about the mosaic, that came, so almost every story in there has some element of dreams to it. And I think there's, I don't know. There was somebody that called me Dr. Dream. And when I was on a TV show, some newscast in New Mexico, and then other people started calling me that. And then so really, my story is about letting go and not having to be smart and just letting the universe guide. And just at least one thing I'm good at is I say yes once it feels like I'm in the right place at the right time. And that's just led me to being
Mm.
very, very having a dream centric life. And that's led me to being able to interpret the signs that come in through life because we're dreaming all the time. So it really translates well into kind of seeing those symbols and unpacking those. I'm going to shut up now and pass the baton back to you.
I love getting to hear that. I mean, we go on all these walks and we talk about dreams and we talk about all the things in between. And I love just getting to hear that part of your story, which I've never heard before. And that kind of, once again, the theme of like deep trust, deep listening, following where life keeps showing up, and it is amazing how like, I pay attention when I hear something, it usually takes me 3 times. I feel like, I'm a storyteller, so we like things in threes.
Yes. Yeah.
So it
Yes.
comes from different directions. You're like, okay, okay, okay. So
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I just want to say one little thing. When it comes to dreams and dream interpretation, I would say like so many people just say, dreams come coded. They're strange. I mean, why was I delivered the word mosaic? Why couldn't it just be more of a printout like, hey, Brian is here. I want you to tell my mom, blah, blah, blah. Like, why couldn't it be more ordinary? But why mosaic? I think there's these symbols are like bullion cubes that are packed with so much information. Dreams speak this very elegant language. If we just don't try to superimpose our logic on top of it, and if we don't try to unpack it and understand it so quickly, I think we can all be better dream workers or understanders of our dream if we're willing to just sit inside the uncomfortable not knowing until the uncomfortable not knowing stops feeling so scary.
Mhm.
I think the best things in life come when we can just sit. And I'm not a patient person. So this is something I have to practice on the daily. Anyway, back to you, Leah.
Well, and you're making me think of when I first started reading Indigenous stories. They were
Mm-hmm.
very upsetting to my
Mm,
Western structured storied brain
mm-hmm.
because we like to tell stories that have a beginning, middle, and end, and where
Right.
everything's explained at the end. And
Right.
to hear these older stories, they actually have space for mystery. they actually have the unexplainable in them, and they can
Mm,
be very discombobulating to this system. But I have to imagine that if my brain wasn't so trained to always having to have the answer to everything being finished and completed at the end and everything making sense, and if I had been raised hearing stories that
mm-hmm,
had that, like one of the characters was the unexplainable, you know, that
mm,
mystery lived there. And I love what you were talking, like, how would I live differently in the world
mm-hmm,
if raised with those kinds of questions? And I so appreciate you just speaking to, right, dreams speak through their own language.
mm-hmm.
Story has its own language, symbol and
Yes.
metaphor, archetypes. And this idea, this kind of egoic assumption that we can understand them if we don't understand, if we haven't taken the time to learn the language, kind of blows
Mm-hmm.
my mind. I want to figure out my dreams. Yes.
There's one of my new favorite words that I learned just this last year is the word kenosis. It's different than gnosis. Are you familiar with the word kenosis? So this is my jam. I think I'm going to get it tattooed somewhere on my body where I can see it so I can remember. Basically, it's divine, the divine emptying. And it was referred to in describing Jesus that his gift wasn't so much about making these miracles happen. It was that he was quite willing to empty himself of his own ego and of his own self importance so that he could be a vessel that would be filled up with something divine. So the when I approach a dream, I feel like I have to be in a state of letting go of my references and what I think it means. Somebody will tell me a dream, oh, the bird this and the house this and my grandma this, and I automatically have my assumptions. But the best way I can be with it is to be willing to just be empty and then let myself get filled up with those symbols and notice where they resonate in me and what I feel, and then what comes from that empty place. There's always a fullness that comes afterward. So that it just dignifies and honors emptying. And I think our Western culture doesn't honor empty. It doesn't honor space. God knows I am a Western girl that is kind of like, let's fill up all the spaces. Oh my God, can't have a breath. Oh no, let's do something. But whew, anyway, it's an interesting thing. And I love what you're saying about these older ways of telling stories and having that space where grace can take place.
Huh. And you're reminding me the land that we live on. You said I'm a Western girl. It's like the land that
Mm,
I lived on, which was,
yeah.
colonized,
Oh, yeah.
right? And
Yes.
in that
Yeah.
puritanical culture, it was against the law to do nothing. If you were idle, you would be punished, because they came
Oh
and it was about
God.
survival, so it's like they had to be constantly doing. I think of that so often, when I'm trying to like
Whoa.
reformat my own way of being to be like, right, so I'm a human being. This is where creativity emerges. This is where life emerges. And this other way was born out of this need to survive. They had to build the houses. They had to get the barns built. They had to take care of the animals. They had to figure out everything so they wouldn't die. That's why they were doing so much, and to realize that that's, for those of us who are especially in the United States, in this culture, which has been, I don't want to call it a virus that has taken over the world, but it's like, it's where that
It
it's
is.
it's good to know, where do these stories originate from? Where are their
Oh.
roots? And I think, like a good gardener, sometimes you've got to clear the garden, and you've got to get to the root of a situation, or it keeps growing. And so,
Oh, that is so good. I one of my deepest um pain places from when I was little. I remember being called lazy, and it was spoken with such disdain that I never wanted to get caught being lazy. So it doesn't mean I couldn't be lazy, but I just didn't want anyone to ever catch me. And if I've ever caught any of the relationships I've been in, I remember I broke up with somebody once because I walked in and he was on the couch, just middle of the day, watching TV, and I was like, that's it. You're out. And I've always flirted with the idea of a book that I would write called The Lazy Girl's Rules for Life,
Mm.
because there's so many things that I've like little life hacks that I do that are about getting like finding more space for laziness, amazing laziness. Maybe
But can we like, I'm
laziness is
wondering if
next to
there's another
godliness.
word, like, can we reclaim the word? We should be looking up the etymology of lazy. If there's anyone
Yeah.
that's listening, you guys want
I
to look
think
up.
it's like laissez-faire. Maybe it's French from like, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't know, because it feels like there's another word that wants to come in. I remember I got into it with a man I was dating, and it was a story. I was in the story of busy, which is a story, and he was like, well, it's like there was my working time, and then there was my time with him, and I was like, yeah, but I need another time. Like, I actually need to go for a walk and like and listen, like, not be with anybody. And he was like, I don't understand. I was like, because that's my time of communion. That's my time of connection. That's where I get all my inspiration. That's the listening. That's actually just as important as being with anyone and everyone else. Is like, that's where every story I come from. It's like it comes from the dreams or from the trees. Amanda has brought us this definition of lazy. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you,
Um,
Amanda.
the adjective of lazy is thought to come from the Low German, I don't know if I'm going to say this, Lasch, someone maybe who can speak German can pronounce that correctly, meaning idle or languid. You were offended at being called lazy, but you didn't have energy deferred to defend yourself. But you just didn't have the energy to defend yourself. Huh. It'd be fun to even go deeper into the etymology of that language. Look, it's from
Yeah.
still looking. Okay, they're still on the hunt. Fascinating. Okay, we
Yeah.
can go down that rabbit hole. We're gonna hop on over. We're gonna eddy out. We're gonna come back to your book.
I love all your pink post-its. That's
It was so
great.
much fun.
You got to take a picture of that for me. That's
I mean, I
that's the
took,
biggest honor.
oh my
Just
God, I mean, it was so much fun. You know what's even great is that I remember when I was reading this, I was really exhausted. I had just gone through a really big life event, and I needed an excuse to stop. And your book gave me that place to rest. So how perfect that we
Mm.
ended up in this conversation. And I mean, so we can write a lot of things. We can write a lot of books. You've written a lot of books, and a lot of them are in service to helping people get to know themselves and explore their consciousness.
Mhm.
This is a different kind of book. This is a book where you went all in on exploring your blind spots,
Mhm.
the places that you weren't so proud of in the moment, your biggest learning spots. Some of them are really hilarious. I still have this great image of you in a hot balloon where it comes down and lands in a wild zoo in Mexico, and you're surrounded by wild
Not a zoo, a wild animal park.
animals.
Like not far from the lions. Amid the zebras and the giraffes and the caribou.
I mean, that was hilarious. There's some great imagery there, and there's also like, this is a very, very vulnerable book. This is raw. And
Mm.
and I'm just curious, before we start getting into like what it's about and what's on these little pink, I wrote on all these little pink things. Um, what inspired you? What did you have to go through as a human, as a writer? Like, one of the big questions I often ask people when they come to me with their stories is, what are you in service to when you're writing this story? Like, what is the
Mm.
spirit of this story in service to? And so that's my question to you. It's
Ooh.
like, what drove you to create something so vulnerable? And I want to just say also, it's not, these aren't just stories. This is also, every story is followed by this process for really exploring how to be accountable
Mhm.
in life. And it's like,
How to alchemize
yeah,
the bleep
yeah,
into, yeah, something
magic.
good and useful.
Yeah.
The grit
So,
into gold. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I love that you said the what are you in service to? Because that is a big part of what propelled it. I mean, I can get into there's so many different getting in places for how this book came to be, but I would say one of the biggest mm, energies that drove me was it was around it was on New Year's Day about 5 years ago, and I had this whole list of ideas of books and oracle cards that I wanted to write, and I was asking spirit, like, of all these things, I don't want to just write a bunch. I just don't want to always be writing. I want to write something that is matterful. I borrow that word from my friend Aspen, who's my writing coach. Aspen Mattis. She's half my age. Thank you very much. And just wise beyond infinity. But I like, what would serve purpose? What would be the best use of me? And I was stopped in my tracks with the download of you got to write the book about the year that you were a stripper. And I was like, no, I don't want it. Like, no, 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 no. But I kind of saw that in the writing of that, there would be something there. And so I began to write that story, excavating it piece by piece, and I did end up writing that book. That's not this book, but it's the predecessor. It paved the way for this book to come out. So I wrote a 400-page book called Stripped: Dancing with My Demons in the City of Angels, that is about when I was 21, the year that I stripped my clothes and stripped my values and stripped my morals and eventually stripped off the BS and kind of found a reason to live and a higher purpose in all of it. But as I was kind of rounding the bend on that, other stories wanted to come out. I started to notice myself strangely becoming like a magpie. You know how they say magpies are always on the alert for the bright and shiny? I feel like I started to become a magpie for the nitty gritty shitty. Like, oh, that's a story. That's something that I is full of shame. That's something that I'm mortified if people found out about. Ooh, I started to call these things in, call in the dark, the call in my dark stories. And it's kind of like doing what I teach people to do with regards to nightmares, is to become, like, if you're being hunted, you become the hunter. If you're being stalked, you become the stalker. You turn the tables on whatever is your nemesis and you move toward them and say, what's up? What are you trying to teach me? Why are you so persistent? What do you want me to know? I'm going to stop running because God knows I can run for a mighty long time. I'm done. I want to just, let's just get to it. And whenever we do that, I'm always shocked when I do this, to find out that what I thought was trying to kill me was trying to give me life serving, life giving wisdom that I can't imagine having lived without. So I feel like I started to turn the table on all my dark and ugly stories, and I started to write about them and become excited about how, what if this is the source of where the gold is? Instead of looking for gold in all the other ordinary places, what if this is these these stories are the ones? So I started to write this other book that became A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. It's kind of my dictionary of crises, of situations that, I mean, from death to mayhem to, like, just everything. I've been through a lot, and I'm somebody who doesn't necessarily, I'm not comfortable in the past anyway, wearing my pain on my sleeve. If you ask me how I'm doing, I'm usually doing pretty well. Like, I figure out how to be okay. But this felt so important to just crack myself open and call on these dark stories, and to cry, and then to practice this OGLE method, to actually do the alchemy and get to the place where now I'm proud of these stories, and it's kind of like I've got this gallery of, like, horror that has turned into beauty. And I'm like, hey, want to come see it? My publishers heard me saying something on social media about these are all my shame stories. And she said, Kelly, they're not just shame stories, they're beautiful stories that actually lead to beauty. They don't stop at shame. It's like with any nightmare. I always tell people if we end the nightmare too quickly, wake up too soon, then we're going to be we're going to be limping through our day following. But if we get back in it and follow it to its natural conclusion, we will emerge victorious with a gift, with some form of strength that we didn't know that we had before. So I feel like that I've gotten the chance to do that, and it's so inspiring to get to put this out in the world. My ego was very scared. My ego did not want to get the backlash that I thought might come from laying this stuff out. But it feels like, at least so far, and I'm knocking on wood, it's having this kind of red carpet effect where it's people are revealing their deep secrets to me. And I feel like it's been this invitation to go deep with people, deeper than I'd been before. And it's such an honor.
Mm. Wow, you said so much. And like, I just want to I want to like pull so many threads from what you just spoke. But one of them is that power of turning and facing your fear. I feel like fear is like this primal animal. And if you run
Yeah.
away from it, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and keep chasing
Mm.
you. But if you just turn, at least in my life,
Yeah,
when I've been able to turn and face it, these other energies will come and be with me. Like
it's
bravery
so
is
true.
with me, courage is with me, the bright light is with me. It's like you can look at it and you're like, oh, you're not that big, hairy, scary thing. I mean, sometimes it is, but usually it gets smaller when you actually, when
It gets smaller. It gets smaller. And
I
then,
don't face the Excel spreadsheets. Oh, but
right. But if we, I mean, this is like the kind of the entendre underneath OGLE, is to really look at things, really look at what's going on. And when we look at it, they do shrink. The little man, it's that we thought was the Wizard of Oz, that was the all powerful, mighty Oz, is just this little thing. So even with an Excel spreadsheet, it's just a bunch of little pieces, and it's all doable. I mean, in fact, one story that will be in whatever is going to be my next book is this woman who had been my nemesis in junior high, who was always the face in all of my dreams of the angry mobs that would be chasing me out of town in my dreams. She would be the one that's like, yeah, Kelly's bad, she needs to burn. And we I ended up coming full circle with her a few years ago, and having this, because of dreams, she shared some dreams with me that revealed what was going on with her that led her to be my nemesis. And just a few nights ago, in my dream, she was in my dream as an ally, kind of with me, maybe not my best friend, but I was left from that dream having to wonder, like, okay, I've spent so much time running from her. I don't have to run from her anymore. Who am I if I'm not running from her? So I'm having to reorient my whole consciousness because so much has been wired into this. So who would we be if we weren't running? If we face all of those demons, those scary ghosts, and we turn them into allies, we alchemize all of them, then who are we if we're not running scared all the time? If we were just, it's like Reverend Michael Beckwith says, pain pushes until inspiration pulls. So now I've created some space. So what inspiration wants to come pull, and having to be in kenosis and having to be in that place of, I don't know. I don't know what's going to be next.
I so appreciate that piece of that emptying out. And like, I agree with the publisher. I didn't read these as shame stories. Because by the time they came to me, maybe they started that way when you started writing them, and
Mhm.
that's where they sourced from. But by the time they got to me, they were teaching stories. They were wisdom
Mm.
stories. They were, there was so much accountability. That's one of the things. He blew my mind. That one
Mm.
with the story with the flower, And when you were
Oh,
running through, can you tell us that story when you're running through the park and you pick the flag? That was one of the more like paradigm shifting stories I think I've ever heard.
yeah, the bougainvillea. In fact, the bougainvillea was going to be on the cover of my book until I took over and jumped on the cover myself. But oh gosh, so this story, it's oh man, I'm probably in my mid to late 20s. I had just really dove into to recovery. I had come out of the strip club world and out of that life of being out of integrity with myself, and was in going to church, going to therapy, 12 steps, inventories, doing all the right things, and yet I was feeling still pretty pummeled and still pretty victimized. And I was jogging through the park by my house one day, and there were these guys in a lowrider that were like doing the typical cat call. Hey, baby, you look good in those shorts. Ooh, like slurping sounds. I'm like, oh God. And in my mind, I was I was at such a breaking point, and I was kind of yelling at God. I'm like, you know what? I'm doing all this work, and you'd think that there would be some change in my outer atmosphere, but I'm still feeling scared anyway. I These guys are getting closer and closer, and they're starting to get more, because I'm ignoring them, and they're starting to get more aggressive. So I I start running, and they're chasing me in the car. I go into the park, and I notice their car is trying to get up into the park as well, but it stalls out because it's a lowrider. It can't go up. And so, but I'm running to try to hide from these guys. And I've had sexual assaults in the past. So of course I'm triggered and full of PTSD, and trying to hide behind some trees, and in case they were to get out on foot and come chase after me. And I stop in this one spot, and I'm instead of, like, my fear kind of transitioned to anger, and I was ranting at God, the universe, whatever, saying I'm doing everything right and nothing out here has changed. Like, if you want to keep me on this planet, you need to give me a sign. You need to do, like, I've made a demand. You gotta give me something, or else I'm just not gonna be here. And it was a lot more dramatic than that, but I'll just put that out there. And I turn around, and I see this incredible bougainvillea bush that I'd probably seen 100 times before, but I had never seen it like this. And it was on fire in my, like, it was fuchsia, but I'd never seen colors like this, nor have I ever since. But it was like it was alive, it was animated, it was dancing in the wind. There was something about it. And I'm a city girl. I was born and raised in LA. I was never much of like, what's the big whoop about nature? But I had never had a connection to anything in nature like this before. And I felt it ministering to me. It felt like it was like I just wanted to get inside this bush because I felt like it was healing me, and I started to feel something like comfort, and I sort of forgot about the guys. I figured if they're going to come get me, they're the ones who are in trouble. I'll be kicking their asses. And so I just was feeling healed, and something was like just moving through me with this bush. And it started to get dark, and I knew, okay, it won't be safe if I remain in this park after dark. I have to go. But I didn't want to, so I was torn. So I pulled off a little sprig from this beautiful bougainvillea to hopefully take some of that energy home with me. So I start jogging back to my apartment, and I get stopped in my tracks with this voice that comes through me that says, "You're just like them." And I thought, what do you mean? Just And all of a sudden I realized this download came through. Those guys were feeling empty, and they saw something that gave them some kind of a spark. They saw something that they considered beautiful and they wanted a piece of it. And they were going after it. They didn't ask permission, they just were going after it. And you also were feeling empty and you saw something inspiring and beautiful and you just, without asking, you just took a piece of it as if it was yours to own. And in that moment, I saw that me and those men were exactly the same fundamentally. And it was like the bitter pill, because to think that was hard for my ego, but it also put me in this state of unity. Like I'm no longer afraid of them, because if we're connected, then they're not outside chasing after me. There was something that started to heal me about that. And the strange thing is that up until then, cat calls and that kind of stuff were the norm. But I didn't get harassed after that. And I was still in my prime. I didn't change the way I looked, but it was like something shifted. I stopped feeling like there were just predators out there. So, cut to a couple years later, I am driving through a really bad part of downtown LA. This was before cell phones and GPS. I'd gotten lost. I've never been great with directions. And I ended up where no woman should ever end up. And it was like the worst part of gang territory. Like it was just bad. And out of nowhere, steam starts coming out from underneath the hood of my car. And my car is breaking down in the middle of this, like the armpit of LA. I pull into a service station and find a little where they have where you can get air for your tires and water and whatever. So I pull into the corner of this service station and I'm literally cornered. I get out of my car and two gangbangers start walking toward me. So here I am again. And what happens that as they approach, something switched in me and I turned toward them and said, "Thank God you're here. Oh my God, I sent out a prayer asking for help and here you are. Do you guys know anything about how to fix cars?" And immediately they kind of looked like, "Wait, what's going on? What? Well, yeah, I do know something about cars." So one guy got under the hood, the other guy got in my car, and they figured out how to fix my car, and they got everything back to normal. I asked them, I said, "What are your names?" "I'm Kelly." And they said, "Miguel and Angel." And I'm like, "Really? Angel? Like an angel and Archangel Michael? And oh my God." Anyway, these guys were so helpful. And then as soon as I was getting back in my car, they said, "This is a really dangerous neighborhood. You shouldn't be here after dark. It's, and I realized I gave them both hugs and thanked them for being the brothers I never had. And I realized, had I not had that bougainvillea experience a couple years before, where I stopped seeing them as other and instead as brother, I might not be here today. Or I might have a very different story to tell. So I'm a little cautious when I tell this story, because I don't ever, ever, ever want to shame the victim and tell anybody who's been a victim of violence that it's their fault, because I've been the victim of violence and I know it's not my fault. However, if there is any place where I could take responsibility, even if it's just the tiniest little sliver, that little piece, I feel in my experience, and I have the authority and the right to tell my story, it changed the way I felt as a woman walking through this world, and I haven't gone back. So there was something alchemizing about doing the exact opposite of what my ego wanted, is to say they're the bad ones, I'm the good one. But that pointing the fingers kept me in hell. And the owning that we're at one with each other, that's where the spell got broken.
Mm.
And I'm alive to tell the tale.
Mm.
And I never see a bougainvillea bush, especially the fuchsia ones, without remembering that moment.
Oh my God, I love so much of that story, and just the expansiveness of it, how big it got and how layers it is, and how long it took to be able to tell that story.
Yeah.
And I want to reiterate something that you said, because I want to keep exploring this piece, because you really dove so much into it, which is and I'm going to call it the victim archetype. And before I talk about this, I want to say, and again, it's like, um, people have had really horrible things happen to them, and they've been
Yeah.
victims of situations. And I
Hmm.
just want to, like, absolutely, um, I want to let that be what it is, and
Yeah.
let not that interrupt the conversation that we're having.
Correct.
The victim archetype, and the archetype is this universal structure,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's one that I've been rather intimate with, in terms of, certain things that happen in my life. I learned that the victim archetype, when I played that role, and I'm making a distinction here. Okay, I'm making a distinction between when something really horrible happens to something and they're victimized by something, compared, which is different to me than what I'm speaking about right now. That's why I'm saying it over and over again, about when we can play a role.
Yeah.
You said something very, very impeccable to me just a moment ago, about it broke this spell.
Yeah.
That there is research done on, and I wish I had these numbers, on our television programming, and how much of that programming shows women being victimized. It's like,
Mm.
it's huge. It is
Mm.
unbelievable how much programming shows women being raped, murdered, harassed, something, and what that does to our collective society in terms of expectations. What do we like? Do we go into the world feeling like we're prey, being predator, like prey, and that there are predators? Like, what happens to our mindset? What spell are we under? How do we walk
Totally.
in the world? So I'm gonna put that on, shelf two, and then there's this other aspect around, playing a victim, and like that victim archetype. And
Mm.
there was a point in my life where I learned that if I did the poor me story,
Hmm.
and so if I got into that victim archetype, energy came towards me.
Yes.
And so it was a way of getting energy. And that
Mm.
and the older I get, the more I can understand and look at dynamics. I've found that, that victim archetype, when people consciously or unconsciously engage and activate that role, okay, different
Hmm.
again than having someone come in and do something. I just want to completely continue to separate these out a little bit, which is that, I find that it can be the scariest person in the room, if not the most dangerous person in the room, because
Mm.
when someone is engaging, I'll just speak for myself. When I engage that energy, when I've been around people that have engaged that energy around me, there's another story that's going on, which is that you've got more life force than I do. I'm gonna have to take it. Poor me.
Right.
I need this, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so there's so much complexity to what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And we're not going to, we're just like walking around. It's like, I feel like there's a fire that we're feeding right now, and we're just going to walk around it and put some logs in it and see how it goes, it's
I
a hot
love it.
fire. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say in when I the formula that I talk about, my alchemy formula that I
Can you walk
use
us
in
through
every
this?
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, the I call it OGLE, OGLE, kind of taking back the kind of the sinister, yucky version of ogle, which is kind of to look at something lecherously. And it's kind of like what I was saying about what I do with a nightmare. If I'm in my right mind, I turn and face the difficult thing that's coming toward me. I become the ogler. So one way to transform is to really look at what's going on. And in the first, so it's an acronym. The O stands for what's offensive. What's offensive about what's happening? So this is where there's permission. I think we have to have permission to play the victim. If something has happened, we need some time and space to just indulge in that. And I know if I try to gloss over that and too quickly get to the transformation, then I'm leaving, it's almost like leaving a pimple unpopped that just keeps festering. So there has to, that's kind of gross, but I feel like there has to be a place for it. So the O in OGLE is about write to your heart's content in your journal, download to a friend, to a therapist, draw pictures, do something to allow yourself to move through what's offensive. How does it land in your body? What are your thoughts? Just get it out.
What's
And
so
then
great
what,
about doing that and not being politically correct about it and being all right is like you get to hear what's really going on. It's a very powerful moment to be
yeah,
able to say, no, this is really, this is the narrative that's going on in my brain that's got me so worked up right now. And
yeah.
for it to have a place to be totally heard.
Yeah, it's like being able to be the parent of our own child self, to be a good parent that says, "Oh, honey, yeah, that sucks. Oh my God, those guys chasing you in the park? That was scary. And you were just minding your own business. You're just trying to get some exercise and you didn't ask for that. And to be terrified to like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry that you had to feel that and that you had to go through that and all those years. Oh my God. So a little bit of like self compassion. And then with that, when we feel complete with the O, and it might take pages and pages. Somebody just shared with me that they did my OGLE formula on something that happened, and it was like 30 pages later, they were able to move to the G. So that's fine. Whatever it takes to get through the O to get to the G. The G is for what's good about this, or what's potentially good about this, what might be good about this. So with regards to the bougainvillea, me and the guys chasing in the park, what was good ultimately was, first of all, I was okay, I was intact, and I met this bougainvillea that I might never have met otherwise, because I was in a different part of the park. I wouldn't have come face to face with this phenomenon had things not unfolded exactly the way they did. So even if there's just the tiniest little hint around the edges of what could be good, this is where we start to tiptoe our way out of victimhood in a very gentle way. And then comes the L for the looking glass. And this is where it all flips around. This is where we ask ourselves, how am I just like them? So for me, that voice came to me that told me you're just like them. And I was like, what? But they're awful. I would never do that. But to recognize what was underneath, what was causing their behavior was exactly the same that caused me, even though pulling a little sprig of a bush isn't the same as like raping somebody, or it's not the same. But it's on the spectrum of taking what isn't ours to take. The the woman who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, who you probably know, Robin, mm, mm,
Yes.
mm, she
Yes.
talks about the Wendigo, which
Mhm.
is this Native American folk. It's kind of a phantom that takes but does not reciprocate. It takes but does not give back. It takes without considering the consequence. There is a Wendigo in all of us. And on that day, I got to see the Wendigo in the mirror. And even though I don't like it, it gave me peace to recognize that they were just like me and I was just like them. I got to stop being separate, because that is the biggest offense. That sense of separateness, that is the problem in my estimation. That's the big challenge that needs to be alchemized. And then once you recognize that, then you move to the E for elevate. Now what can I do about it? What is the little teeny within my lane, because I can only do what's in my lane. What is something I can do, an elevated action or an elevated thought that can shift me? So from my perspective, what I did was I stopped just picking random plants because I thought they owed me something, and I did start to look and contemplate people being not separate from me and being just like anybody I would judge, even the worst offenders. Do I have an inner Saddam Hussein? You bet I do, because you spot it, you got it. Even if it's just a speck in the mosaic of who I am, it doesn't mean it's the whole of me, but it's a speck. All of humanity is in here. Every single bit. The Mother Teresa, I got that speck too. And all of them. So that's the E. So the O is for what's offensive, permission to moan and groan and be in victim mode. Then we move to the G for what's good about this, or what could potentially be good about it. And the L is for the looking glass. And then the E is for elevate. How do we make a change? How do we learn? How do we become a little bit better as a result of having gone through that challenge?
And just, I see a lot of people taking notes. I see people throwing up their hands right now. And after every single chapter and every story that you told, you also went on to OGLE it, every single story. So it was really, I really think of this book as a gift, Kelly, in terms of the, because it's one thing just to tell somebody your story and be like, bleh, I got it out.
Right, right.
You carry
That's
that for a
true.
while. I'm done,
Right. I feel better now. Why are you all covered in vomit? What's going
Right.
on?
you know and this is, to me, this is not just a memoir. This is really a gift in terms of really helping people step into that wisdom one that can really hold that. And it's funny because I read the OGLE thing. I don't know how many chapters, 15, 17, how many chapters are in here.
The 30.
30. I read all of them, just so you know. It didn't feel like 30.
Wow.
But there's a piece in there that I had never heard before until you just described it, which is actually a critical piece of the Ho'oponopono prayer, which is the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And to me, that is
Yes.
the fast, this is going to sound horrible, the fast track to peace. Like when I'm really
Yeah.
heated with somebody and, oh, they've done something that's like that whole
I
voice.
would never do that. Oh, yes, you would.
Yeah, it's like Ho'oponopono in some circles has made it into this song, which I won't comment on. But to me, like the true practice of Ho'oponopono is when you see that thing which you've deemed absolutely unforgivable, the worst thing ever. How dare they? And you find that, and then you find that peace in yourself.
Right.
And you really find it. And it's like you started off in acting, and I remember, I started off in acting too, and you learn that main principle that like there's a piece of everything inside of us, right? We learn that it's like you can engage any character when you find that part in you that could do it. And
Right.
it's again looking at, wow, we have these incredible vessels. And I'm just going back to the original actor was doing an act of devotion to Dionysus. They're literally bringing the god into matter and form. That's how acting started. It was,
Oh,
I'm not going to, related to shamanism,
yeah.
embodiment of the gods, bringing spirit to earth. And so this piece that you're saying, it's like, yeah, I find that part of the other that lives in me, that universality, that universe piece. And that's what Ho'oponopono is also doing. It's like, I can find that piece in me. What would be happening inside of me that would chase down something, that
Right.
would take something, that would do that, and then forgiving that piece. And so I
Right.
hear the universal genius in your process that
Yeah.
is coming
And
through.
to not just, I mean, it seems like in the past, I mean, there to just jump to, well, how might I do that? Might be a little abrasive. It feels like there needs to be that little space to be able to indulge in the pain, and then to baby step to get there. But really, you're right. The L, that looking glass piece, is where the alchemy happens. And it doesn't happen otherwise. If there was another way to get to the alchemy, believe me, I would have found it. And I'd be doing that because it's hard. It is hard for the ego. I like to think of myself as, all presentable and the way that I thought things should be. And to say there's a part of me that could do that. Absolutely. If, especially if we look underneath, the late great Debbie Ford talked about how every shadow and every shadow behavior is really just a characteristic that's fine, just turned up a few notches too high. So those men wanting to have me, that was there was a seeking to fill up an emptiness, seeking to meet a need, which is that's what we do all day long, is to try to meet a need. We eat food, we hang out with people like you, we be on a podcast like this because we're all trying to meet a need for something. That's great. It's just when it's turned up 10 notches too high, then it becomes aberrant. But underneath it, there's always something. I mean, somebody kills somebody, it's often to meet the need for significance, or like to prove that they have power. We all have a need for some degree of significance or power. I mean, it doesn't mean that we condone all that behavior. Abso-friggin-lutely not. But we can, it feels like coming back to the lazy thing, the lazy girl's way of creating world peace is to truly love and embrace each of those little shadow characters within myself, and then to look out and notice the world has changed without me having to exhaust myself trying to fix everybody and shake them and teach them something. It's like, let me just
Mhm.
teach this part of me and let things fall at my feet. I'd rather do it that way if that was an option.
Yeah. Oh, Kelly, I just noticed that behind you in this amazing screenshot that you've given us are all your books. I didn't realize because I actually haven't seen the cover of all your books.
Oh,
Amazing.
not all, but some of them.
And I love that. I'm just catching that. I just want to make sure if there's any questions among us or if there are any dreams that are among us, which I have to tell you guys this crazy dream that I just had. It was amazing.
Tell them while I just take a little bio break, but I'm still listening. Go.
So this is true and it really happened, which is the other night I woke up, excuse me, a bit of stress. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes if I wake up really early, I'm like, I'll just do it. I'll just do the work that's on my mind and then I can go back to sleep. But my cat was having none of it. Like when I pulled the computer onto my lap, he was like, no, that's not happening. And he like jumped on my chest and I surrendered and I went back to sleep. And I'm sleeping and I was kind of in a state of, just like anxiety about some things. And I don't know about you guys, but when I do that, I'm like, okay, I'll do my gratitudes. Like it's not going to help me to just stay exhausted. I'll be really grateful about everything, and I'll do that, and I'll picture myself and the world I most want and all that. And I fall back asleep, and Jerry Garcia arrived in my dream, and he said, "I just want you to know that I'm your patron saint." And I'm like, Jerry, you're my patron saint. I've never listened to your music. How kind of you. so, but get this. So I'm like, okay. And then I wake up. So I think this is rather hilarious. So of course I look up Jerry and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to call on the gods of Google to show me what does Jerry have to say to me as a patron saint? Apparently a lot of people have experienced this, by the way. There's like a whole patron saint candle of Jerry Garcia. If you guys feel like calling on the patron saint of Jerry Garcia.
Wow.
And he said, I learned two things. One was that Hawaii was his drug of choice.
Mm.
And that when needing to, like, when he was really burned out, he like really went to that place to rest and restore. But then there was this other bizarre thing, which is that he had his ashes put in two different places. And one of them was under the bridge of San Francisco Gate Bridge. And
Mm.
I have been obsessed with bridges in the past year. Like it's the only thing I can think about of like what it is to be a bridge between two worlds, between two dimensions, to be like making a bridge from one realm of work to another realm of work, to be connected, to be things that have to carry the burden. Like it's been this obsession, and to realize that like bridge is one of his favorite things. I don't know. It was really fun.
That's
And then he came and visited me the next night, and he had, oh my gosh, the next night he comes around and he says, I'm looking at something, and I go into this room. You're going to love this. I go into this room, and there's this woman that's like saying that she needs all this help. Did I tell you this dream the other night? Anyway, she's saying she needs all this dream. She needs all this help. And her house needs rewiring. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go fix it for you. But I don't know how to rewire a house. So I blow the circuits. And that's when I woke up. And Jerry was there too.
whoa. Okay. Wow. Can we unpack this?
Sure.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, first of all, just quickly, what is, if you were going to describe Jerry Garcia in with three adjectives, what would they be?
Um, well, I mean, fun. I think he brings a
Okay.
lot of fun to the world. I do think of him like in the way that my friends described him, which is like he was the shaman of the dance floor. He, that he introduced this entire culture of LSD and then would take huge, thousands and thousands of people on this, you know, acid trip journey through his music. So it's like I
Oh.
do think of him as someone that was like a consciously being a guide between the worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And he was, I don't know, a nice dude. I mean, I really don't know that much about Jerry
Yeah,
Garcia. I missed that whole part of the culture when it was happening.
I did too, and so I'm just going to jump in if it were my dream. I also think that there's something about the Grateful Dead, which is such like those are words that normally don't go together, and it's kind of like the for me, my experience is that one of the big things that would have us be ungrateful and suffer in this life and not be able to dance and have fun is the threat of death or the threat of other people that we love dying and but to for him to be able to dance and laugh in the face of death and to be such a carefree spirit who I didn't ever really get to know. I was supposed to go to like three different Grateful Dead shows, and every time there was some obstruction, so I never got to go. I have a little FOMO about that, but I do feel like there's something really profound about the Grateful Dead. At least I get that, and to be this person that influenced so many people and still does even from the other side. So everyone and everything in the dream is an aspect of ourselves. So this would be about embracing my inner Jerry Garcia and recognizing that wisdom that's coming from the other side. And I love the whole notion of being a bridge, the whole part about him putting his ashes underneath the San Francisco bridge. You are such a bridge. The Leah in my imagined version of this dream is a bridge between stories, between realms. I mean, if there was ever a symbol besides whale dreamer, it would be bridge to describe you and what you do and who you be. And I also think it's interesting this woman who's asking for help. I had a woman asking for help the other night too. So this is kind of coincidental, and I didn't immediately, and somebody just came to me with a dream a couple days ago with a dream where there was a woman asking for help, and he didn't help her either, and he's the helping type and I'm the helping type, and I was like, no, this is a trick. This is no, I'm going to come back later, but I'm going to get some strength and so this is interesting. So you go in and you help the rewiring, but it blows the circuit. So it makes me wonder, if it were my dream, how am I blowing my own circuits by trying to do too much that's not necessarily in my wheelhouse? I'm trying to be overly helpful, maybe allowing my codependence to overly fix, and really it's not helping. So something like that.
That's
What
what
is
I
that? What does that bring up?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, well, I just think I'm just kind of in awe that there are a lot of people having the same dream. And
Mm.
I'm like, man, was there like a little collective consciousness test going around and I
What?
failed it? You know?
Yeah, that like having a woman ask for help in the dream.
And I mean, I mean, the immediate thing that I got, because the presence Jerry Garcia was in that dream too, where I was like because I started researching him, and apparently he kind of blew his own circuits, and he got really exhausted and overworked and the whole thing and stressed and all of it. And I felt like, okay, like I was in there in a state of praying for guidance and help. And like he gave me a couple of lessons and he was like, right, like, and
You
by the
need
way,
to be more lazy,
right, would you be more lazy? Just chill out more.
more kenosis, more laziness, less frying out those circuits. And that woman inside, that the woman in part of us that's saying, help me. But maybe she doesn't really need help. Maybe she just needs to do it herself and to do a little bit less.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of women, we overdo. What was that book that came out years ago, Women Who Love Too Much? I think there
Yeah.
needs to be the follow-up, Women Who Do Too Much.
Yeah. And also that idea that don't go fixing things you don't have the right tools for.
Right, right. Yeah. So with a dream like, yeah, yeah, I would just ask, how would you, if you, knowing what you know now, what would you change in the dream or what would you do differently?
Oh God, I love it when you ask that question. What would I do differently? I think I'd call 911. I think
Yeah.
I would just like, call someone else who's more skilled to do that kind of thing. Or to not have my first impulse to be like, oh, you need help, I'll fix it. To like actually take a pause. And maybe this is a greater theme of what is in here. I still want to recreate this new word for lazy, but like pausing, being, maybe a little bit more time just for being rather than reacting or responding, and just
Mhm.
considering a little bit more, and then letting someone else, making space for someone else who's much more skilled to come in and do what needs to happen.
Letting people do for themselves. Yeah. Yeah. With as a woman who does too much or in recovery from that, somebody just shared with me actually this morning that when you are doing things for other people, when you're being their hero, it's as if you're sending out the subliminal message that you are better than them, more capable. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, okay, no, 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 can't do that. I mean, we can support each other without but if we're doing it for them, then we're like messing with our own circuitry because we're not better. We are all equally
Right.
accessed to support. And why not? I mean, the lazy girl's guide would be to call on the troops. Like, I don't know how to do that. Who does? Whew, come on in, cavalry. Like, whoever knows how to do it, you do it. I'll just sit back and Mark Twain it. Or what was that? Well, not Mark Twain. Oh God. Oh God. I can't think of the story with the painting story.
Oh,
The
Mark
Huckleberry
Twain.
Finn,
Mark
where
Twain.
he's Mark Twain with
Yes.
Huckleberry Finn. It's like
Yes.
instead of painting the fence all himself, like having a party, everybody come in, grab a brush, and it gets done like that.
On that note, um, thank you, Kelly, for such a delightful, wide, deep, expansive conversation. And a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And that's the name of the book. And where do you want people to go to get it? Do they go to your website? Do they go to Amazon? Like, what's the
All of the above, local bookstores if
local
possible,
bookstores? Go to
and
your local bookstore.
go to
God.
your local bookstore. But a lot of people are just gonna do a click, 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 and that's fine too. Amazon's great, or Books a Million, or even you can go to Simon and Schuster or Beyond Words. You could go straight to those places. Whatever you want to do, I say thank you. My request is that, oh my God, if people like the book, please leave a review. That helps. And when because the book just came out, all the reviews really help and make a difference to being able to access I don't know, to get it out to more people. It makes a difference. So thank you so much for reading the whole book.
My God,
Oh
it
my
was
God.
such a joy. It was really
Leah.
such a pleasure. And I can't wait to read
Oh,
the script. And so that I'm really looking forward to reading that. And,
oh.
what I'll
It's a
also
little different than this one. It's a little,
great. I'm looking forward to
okay.
it.
It's a
And
story.
and for those of you who want to come back and experience another podcast tomorrow, we're going to be having a talk tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with Rahel. It was going to be talking all about rites of passage and ceremony. And for those of you who really want to start working at playing with your own stories, and particularly accessing that dreaming space, we have a class called Vision Stories that's coming up in March. It's a 4-week class, and it's the class that really gets into being in that dream state, really exploring symbols. And more than anything, to me, it's one of my favorite classes because it's where we get to directly take on this idea that our future has been hijacked, that our imagination's been hijacked, and we get to reclaim it through the our own vision stories. And Kelly, do you have classes that you teach? Is there
I
anything?
do. Well, I have a retreat coming up in Costa Rica that will be a crisis is a terrible thing to waste retreat. There will be dream circles, yoga, sound healing, a big, beautiful waterfall on property, on site with healing mud. So we'll get to cover ourselves in mud and exfoliate externally and internally. And that's coming up in June, June 6th through 13th. And you can find out about it on my website, kellysullivanwalden.com. And I am teaching, I have a course called Dreamwork Practitioner Training for people that want to be more fluent in the language of dreams in their own, and for people who want to incorporate it into their current profession, whether they're a therapist or a healer or somebody who just wants to do dream work by itself. So you can find out about that on my website as well.
Yay. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah Lamb. I so
Pleasure.
appreciate you, and I love that the whales brought us together, and that my friend Gypsy, the whale Gypsy, brought me to the whale goddess.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And yeah, just amazing. It just can't mastered today, that recording.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
I
So
hope you all have heard it.
what's
It's
happening is that
incredible. Oh, wow.
Kelly's amazingly talented and hilarious. I can't call him hilarious, but he makes me laugh a lot. Unintentionally.
I call Dana the sit down comic.
Yes, it
He
don't go
doesn't.
He's an incredibly talented composer, songwriter, sound producer. I don't have all the right titles, but he was the one that created this soundscape to When We Were Whales, this beautiful song. And yeah, he just sent me the master just before we got on. So we'll be sharing that very soon.
And I love that that's what bonded us. That's what connected us was this whale. Oh my God, that's a whole other story. I would love to tell that one of these days. It's really special.
We'll have to get together soon again.
Hmm.
All right. Love you dearly.
Love you dearly. Thank you so much for bringing me in and introducing me to your beautiful community. It's great to meet you all. Thank you so much for your attention and your listening and for your storytelling and all that you be in the world. So if we're going to be telling stories, let's make them good ones.
You will be. And if everyone wants to take themselves off mute and say farewell, goodbye, and send Kelly off to the big
Auf Wiedersehen, good night.
fire, then may we do so. Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. It's wonderful to meet you. Pleasure.
Thank you, Riva. Riva? Reva?
Riva.
Riva. Is that another Dana?
Thank you, Kelly. I've
Thank you,
been
Kelly.
following you for a long time. This is Diana Spirit Hawk. And I
Oh, Diana Spirit Hawk, she muted.